allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. And tonight, we're going to start a little different. We're going to start in with swearing in of police officers. Jean, you want to take care of this? And the chief. And the chief.
Hi, good evening. So yes, as President Rao indicated, we're going to be taking the opportunity to swear in some new officers. It's a little bit different setup in that we have different officers from different points in their career, basically. So the first two officers have been on the job for a little bit with Cumru, and we're just now getting the opportunity to swear them in. And then we have two officers that just graduated the academy, and then one officer that we just hired recently that we're going to be swearing in. So in order of seniority, I'd like to introduce the first officer who will be sworn in. His name is Callan Kress. Callan's been a police officer for about 4 years now. He did come to us with the police academy already having graduated and trained as a police officer, and he's already proven himself in these 4 short years that he has received FTO status, which is field training officer status. So he is actually tasked with training our brand new officers, and which is it's a critical role and probably one of the most important roles in the police department. So that just tells you a little bit of how well Callan has done in the short time that he's here. The next officer is Officer Leon Grimm. Officer Grimm comes to us with 28 years of service. Now he's been with us for 3 years or 2 years. Seems like 2 years. He's been with Cumru for 2 years, but he has a remarkable career in municipal policing with the Wyoming Police Department, and then as well as being the chief of police in Lower Heidelberg, South Heidelberg. There's a lot of Heidelberg, yes. So we were lucky to get Officer Grimm, and he's been a tremendous addition to our department. Walking in with his experience, as you can imagine, he walks in and immediately can mentor and answer questions from officers. So his greatest challenge, which he accomplished probably in less than a week, was just learning the geographic area of the township. So we're incredibly happy that he's with us. Next officer is Officer Eric Foster. Officer Foster has just graduated from the academy. So he's been with us for less than a month on the street here. He is one of the officers that will be with the FTOs. He's currently with an FTO, I think Ben's right in the back right there. And I'm getting reports that he's doing a tremendous job, Officer Foster, and he's progressing through the program. So in a short period of time, he'll be on his own and operating the vehicle by himself. So we're looking forward to that. He has just, like I say, graduated the Reading Police Academy. Next officer I'd like to introduce is Officer Christopher Fallara. Officer Fallara is classmates with Officer Foster, graduating from the academy. He's been with us a very short period of time. Right now, Officer Foster or Fallara, you're on what shift? Second shift. They do bounce around shifts to go from FTO to FTO, so they can see every shift and learn from different FTOs as they go. So he's in the same phase as Officer Foster, and again, doing a very good job. And I'm looking forward to, in a short period of time, for him to be out of the zone. And that brings us to our newest officer, Officer Michael D'Annunzio. Officer D'Annunzio comes to us with the Act 120 Police Academy already. So he is our newest addition to the force, and we're excited to have him here. He's so new that unfortunately we haven't even been really able to get uniforms and everything squared away. But we obviously are in the process of doing that, and we look forward to him progressing through as well. But these are the newest addition to the Cumru Township Police Department, and they've done an incredible job so far, and I look forward to working with them for many, many, many more years to come. So Manager Johnson will swear you in You'll sign the swearing in. We'll provide you with copies of that later. And after the swearing, and after Sir Denunzio signs his letter, his father's going to come up and present him with his badge. Every other officer, as you can see, has had the opportunity to get their badge already. Officer Denunzio is not, so we'll allow his father to provide him with that badge.
All right, how I'd like to do this is I'm going to point to each of you, if you raise your right hand and say your name, and then I'll administer the oath, and then I'll ask each of you to say that you will. Hopefully you will.
Count for us. Count for us.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and that you will discharge the duties of police officer in Cumru Township, Berks County with fidelity? Do you swear or affirm? Thank you. Thank you. I think.
One more time. That's all right.
I'm not being around.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, moving right along with a presentation from Nick Bieber from Relied.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Turtel. I'm an audit partner with the Relied company. I believe all of you probably know Nick. He's a return visitor. He's senior manager on the audit, and we are here to present the 2023 audit for Cumru Township. We're going to get through a brief introduction. We'll review the audit report for 2023, a couple of financial highlights and trends, and some other communication. Each one of you have a landscape document that we have passed out as the bound one with right to find. Either way. I'm going to move on to page 3. Just a brief introduction. We'd like to remind everybody that we audit under generally accepted auditing standards. Generally accepted auditing standards, same audit standards that you would have for your for-profit entity, your non-profit entity, same type of audit that's involved with a financial audit of the company. The audit's under cash basis of account, modified cash basis of account. So very typical. That's how most municipalities within the Commonwealth actually do their accounting. Cash in the doors when you have revenue, cash out the doors when you have expense. And our responsibility as auditors is to take a look at the financial information provided by management and to give you an opinion on whether it's reasonably assured that it's within modified cash basis of account. The rules and regulations of modified cash basis of account. Page 4 just tells you we have an unmodified opinion. So it's a clean audit opinion. Auditing the strange slates fund is actually the best opinion that you can get fund modified. So clean audit opinion, township does a nice job, working with Gene, Peg, it's a nice lot of process, they're very prepared for us, ready for us to open the door. And it really makes, a pretty simple overall process with both ends. Then I turn it over to Nick, and he's gonna walk through a little bit of financial results from 2023 on page 5.
Thank you, Chris. So the first schedule that you see on page 5, this is the general fund budget actual highlights. Looking at the overall total revenues, those came in $230,000 over budget. This is a 2.4% variance. Some of the key line items that had larger variances, you'll see real estate taxes was $114,000 under budget. And the key difference there was the budget was prepared with expectations of higher overall assessed values. So the actual results came in, it's only a 2% variance, but $114,000 overall. One of the biggest components here was interest, with the rising interest rates throughout the year that came in $246,000 increase over the prior year and $290,000 over budget. The intergovernmental line item is $170,000 over. The two key components there was $118,000 from DCD for a stormwater grant, as well as police tuition reimbursements of $44,000, which are revenues that were not budgeted. Charges for services came in $86,000 under. The biggest component there was the host fees. Those were $114,000 under budget for the year, with that revenue stream coming to an end in 2024. And then the other component, the largest piece of that was there was $63,000 of health insurance reimbursements. These are budgeted as revenues, and they do come, that $63,000 they come in, but for the financial statement presentation purposes, they're reclassified against the related expenses for the year, since that's generally a recurring year-to-year reimbursement that's received on the health insurance side. Moving down towards to total expenditures, those were $263,000 under budget, a 2.6% variance. Not many significant line items here to note. Largest dollar item though was under the police, under public safety. That was $100,000 under budget, mostly in health benefits. Another larger line item that stands out was within community development. That was $50,000 under as presented. So that was an expense that did occur, but the actual recording of that was within the public works expense line item. So those net together, but that expense did occur as budgeted. Moving down, there was gain on sale of capital assets of $16,000 and transfers out to capital of $880,000. This brought an overall change in fund balance as a decrease of $808,000 versus the budget decrease of $1.3 million. So that's overall $528,000 positive. So the beginning fund balance of $5.5 million with that decrease of $808,000 brought the general fund balance to about $4.7 million at the end of the year. Moving on to page 6, the two other funds that classified as major funds were fire protection and capital projects. The fire fund had an overall budgeted use of fund balance of $146,000. The actual results for the year was a use of fund balance of $225,000. Some key line items there with variances was interest was $42,000 over, and the other category there includes $52,000 contribution from waste management. And then on the contrary to that, leading to the excess of what was budgeted for the deficit was expenditures exceeded the budget by $162,000, primarily in the wages and benefits category with hiring of 2 new firefighters. The ending fund balance there of $1,459,000 does include $761,000 that is designated for capital purchases. Under the capital projects fund, there was interest and revenues of interest and rent. So that was interest revenue of $654,000, primarily with the significant holdings of the bond funds as that those projects continued. And then the intergovernmental of $238,000 relates to a grant from DCED for the utility extension project. On the expenditure side, there was $1.5 million overall. $626,000 of this was spending from the bond issuance on the municipal campus project. And then other expenditures that include vehicle purchases, equipment leases, as well as storm sewer and road work. With the transfers in of $880,000 from the general fund, that fund had an increase of $272,000 for the year, bringing the ending fund balance to $13.3 million. And 13.3 of this, so slightly under that, relates to remaining amount to be spent from the 2020 general obligation bonds. So with $13.8 million in bids awarded for phase 2 for the fire station, subsequent to year end, those funds will be spent in full with those projects. The next stage is the various non-major funds. So just a little terminology definition, there's a criteria test between what's classified as major and non-major. So it would be 10% of the overall governmental or 5% of the total, which would include the sewer revenues of either assets or revenues or expenditures that meet both those criteria. So these are the put it simply, the smaller dollar funds that help. So looking at the overall net change in fund balance, you'll see all of those had an increase, except for stormwater with a slight decrease of 127,000. One that I do want to point out, which is the largest of the non-major funds, is refuse collection. That has an ending fund balance of $310,000 compared to expenditures of $1.3 million. So that's at about 3 months of expenses that's held at year end. So that's an important criteria to look at, because until you have funds coming in for refuse collections for the year, with those costs increasing, that's something that, from looking at the cash flow side of things, is important to maintain at least that 3 months of fund balance in the refuse fund. Moving on to page 8, the sewer fund highlights. The budget for the sewer fund was a use of net position of $653,000. The actual result was an increase of $1.6 million. So the key difference there was a couple significant projects that were delayed, primarily Cedar Top Road, which was a $1.8 million budget for capital cost and engineering. The sewer grouting repair project was $350,000 under, as well as less treatment costs through the city of Reading, which were about $300,000 over budget. So it's not that those costs aren't going to occur, it was just the delay, so that's going to be picked up in the 2024 year. So with that increase in net position of $1.6 million, across the ending net position in the sewer fund to $6,482,000. Now that $6.4 million, about $3.4 million is designated for capital purposes. Page 9 is some trend information within the major funds, the general, fire, and the sewer funds. This gives you, it's nice to do a look back of 5 years to see how things are trending. So a couple things to note here, within the general fund, that's ending $4.7 million. One thing that we recommend, again, look at the cash flow general fund, since you have a couple months until real estate tax revenues really start to flow in. The recommended minimum there is no less than 20 to 30% of operating expenses as a reserve in the general fund. At the end of 2023, the township reserve was 41%, so it did exceed that. But an important thing to note there was with the 2024 budget, it had a budgeted use of $1.78 million in the general fund. So if that does come to fruition for 2024, at the end of the year, we'd be at about 25% of the budget expenditures for the next year. The fire fund as well was at $1.46 million, and that had a budgeted loss of $841,000 for the 2024 year. And the sewer fund was at $6.4 million overall. This includes the capital portion as well, and a budgeted loss of $1.45 million. While they're healthy fund balances at the end of 2023, it's important to keep this in mind as you plan for the future with those budget deficits. Obviously, that's something that's unsustainable. So having a long-term plan in place is important for the township.
I think this is a little presentation we're gonna do after this on financial health. And so many of you know Nick from the past, so Linda Heimbach was the partner on the engagement for retirement from that. So I kind of stepped in there to take over here. And so, you know, as a firm, we do audits of 30+ municipalities from Burns, Chester, Montgomery, Lancaster, counties in the area. And quite common to see, you know, spend down fund balance. I mean, it's something that you do, but for a list of, budget deficit, you know, follow and look down. But just keep in mind, if you're at 1.7 million, you budgeted to use 1.7 million this year. You can only use so many 1.7 millions before you run out of 1.7 million. So it's just an interesting concept, and just keep in mind also when you start at that point, then when you do the 2025 budget, you know, Gene's already starting with that 1.7 hole going into next year. So it's just, you know, things to keep in mind, keep into consideration. You know, some of the assessment side of things, I know it's been a little bit of a challenge looking at real estate assessment. You see a lot of that right now. You know, assessment appeals are pretty high also. The common ratio is pretty high, doing a lot of the appeals like there. So there's a lot of stuff going on built from a planning standpoint, which is why it's important to kind of look at those trends, right? Just kind of keep an eye on it, where it's going, and understand where you are. That's what we like to bring that to your attention. And a lot of you already know the numbers. It's kind of, this is kind of stuff that it's more important you kind of see what plans. Feel free to ask any question you have.
Not that I've asked either, go into specifics, but I'm curious, as you look at the numbers in your township, could you comment, whatever you may, on like how we may fare in relation to similar municipalities?
So it's a very strong financial standpoint, right? So in my really bad bet, I told Bob that I wanted to stay. Nick probably knows better that a stand in me and a microphone is probably not gonna work out, so. You're still in a very strong financial position, right? I mean, as Nick commented, you still have, you know, you're going into the year with 4.7 million in fund balance on a $10 million budget, right? So you're still in a position where you can afford to kind of spend down that fund balance a little bit and still be okay. And we're seeing that more and more right now. You know, I'm sure Kelsey, you see it too. The assessment appeals are a big thing, and you're seeing, especially on the commercial side, you don't see a lot of the increase on the commercial side of the assessment appeals. Earned income tax has still been a very strong driver, and that's still driving here. A lot of places you're actually seeing the earned income tax eclipse real estate taxes being the main revenue stream of the municipality. So that's something that, you know, as you're going along, you see that. Now, Cumru doesn't have a mercantile tax, right? You're not a business privilege tax community.
Right.
You know, whereas Spring or Why Missing have that in their toolkit. You know, it's an Act 11 tax taken and still, you know, levied. So that gives them a little bit more. But overall, like, you're still in a good financial position. You are. But anytime you have, you know, I'm not gonna pick on my chief Winchester here a little bit, but no, full-time police forces are a great thing to have in the township, right? I live in Spring Township, you know, I'm very fortunate to have, you know, the police force that we have there. But they come with cost also, right? I mean, I saw, you know, great replenishment of new officers that you bring in the door. And that's wonderful, right? But that's, you know, a cost that you're looking at, a cost you have to, you know, keep budgeting for within your township, and health insurance and the other costs continue to increase also. So from a revenue standpoint, I know that's a big part of your presentation, is talking about like, where's that revenue stream going to come from, right? But to answer your question, like when I look across the board, you're still in a very good favorable position. You are. From a reserve standpoint, to be able to do some things and continue moving forward. It's just make sure you plan that and don't just rest on your laurels and say, oh, we'll be okay next year, and wait for the windfall to come that I don't see the federal government reaching into your bank account again to give you another, you know, whatever we got SLF or F money there.
1.6 million.
There you go. So, hope that helps a little bit. We'll go with this one more time. I mean, in the spirit of the Olympics, do I get anything for the Twins that are back?
The last set of numbers that we have for you on page 10 looks at the funding status of pension plans. So there's two different actuarial evaluations that are presented here in the financial statements. The first set on your left is the schedule funding progress in accordance with Act 205. So this is what the MMO is based upon. And that's a valuation that occurs every 2 years. Whereas the valuation in accordance with GAP 60, so slight differences as far as the actual valuations and assumptions behind those, but that one is done on an annual basis. So as you can see here, within both valuations, you'll see the pension plan for the police side is in a well-funded position. The important thing to note on the non-uniform pension side is that's the defined benefit plan. So with that previously being frozen at the time of that 1/1/23 valuation, the contributions as far as what was calculated by the MMO were minimal. And going forward, that MMO is, until you have a new valuation done that it can be based on, is still going to be at the low end. But the township did proactively plan to start increasing those contributions starting in the 2024 year above and beyond the MMO, because you know with that, there will be a hit with an increase in that liability with that reinstatement as of the 2024 year.
And we do intend on addressing the 2024 MMO next month before in September, we have to address the 2025 MMO. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that next month.
I would say this one's an order, right? I'm talking 2023, she's already in 2025. So, some required communication, so, like I mentioned earlier, like working with Peg and Dean, you have a really good staff, you do, they know their numbers, they know their stuff. Coming in, I had a great conversation, Bob actually was in a room, kind of gave me a little background here, some of the public works challenges and vehicles and where we are getting some trucks in the door and replenishing what we have. But overall, we don't have any real recommendations for any internal control improvements at this point. We take a look at them, we don't do a type of internal control, that's not part of what we do. But we do look through, just kind of get an analysis, understanding of what's going on. No difficulties performing the audit, we don't have any new accounting standards this year. Proposed entries realistically with cash budget, cash basis township, really just reclassifying every once in a while from a different chart of account, just to match up with the state and make them a little happy with what we're reporting. That's really it from our standpoint. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm sorry.
You have any major recommendations that you can make to the township at this time?
Nothing major from a procedural standpoint, in the office itself. Good job, dude.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out again, for the board, that when you look at this relative to the monthly budget reports, they are combining the fire checking account, if you will, with the fire capital. They're also combining the sewer so-called checking account with the sewer capital. So if the numbers look a little strange, that's why they're putting them together. Whereas on a day-to-day basis, we use those capital accounts, the 039 fund, fire capital, and the 809 fund, the sewer capital, as sort of savings accounts, if you will, for saving up for those capital expenses. So that's just a difference when you're looking at this relative to looking at your monthly budget report. Yes, Mr. Henry.
Chris, I have a question for you. Back on page 9, you're on the slide. What ending fund balance stream? So, in segment pages, without any books of plans. You sometimes don't agree on the next stage of the plans to do. I'd like you to expand.
From a planning standpoint, really just kind of looking at what you see, where your contracts are going down the road. Well, you have staff that's contractually, collective bargaining agreements, you kind of know where your wages are going to be, which is a major part of your expenditures going forward. And making projections and just kind of knowing where your revenue streams are coming from, you have a somewhat of an idea from trends, from the EIT office and other items where you are, and making a financial plan. The other side that I think you do a nice job is just looking at the capital side of things too. Capital replacement is a big piece, right? So it's not just thinking about the current year, but it's also thinking, when are we going to need a new HVAC system? When are we going to need a new public works truck and planning for that? So you're not trying to fit a $200,000 triaxle into a one-year budget.
I'm also interested in what we could do to develop the economic position in the township.
So now you're getting out of my scope a little bit. So as an auditor, I like to say I'm more like I I do like the autopsy, right, like the numbers were already there, and I just kind of tell you how about it. Got it. Yeah,
That's a bit dark, you know.
I understand. I do, I mean. Well, would you rather be truthful, Gene, or would you rather be, a little dark? I mean. But, the truth is every township is a little bit different, right, just based upon how you're built and what your strengths and the needs are. And that's why you have these fine folks up here that are gonna debate that and figure out what the best way for you to move forward is. Thanks, for absolutely.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, so next up,
We have the.
under the financial overview and economic development opportunity presentation.
This was not planned, by the way. I did not plan on piggybacking off of the accountants, but it kind of works. I'm sorry. It's gonna come up here, yeah. I think this one here. I'm not gonna break anything. Thank you. So Gene's pulling this up. I'll just, some of you may know this already, some of you may not. I work for one of the largest banks in the country. I'm an analyst for large corporate and municipal transactions. So my job is to take the work of these folks and analyze it and come up with interpretations around specifically for lending decisions. But I will also get into planning for situations where we see signs of distress and things like that too. But my job entails going through like macro, micro level analysis for companies and municipalities, getting into demographics, industry studies, all kind of stuff that probably would bore the pants off of some of you, but I find it fascinating. So I didn't do all that just to warn you, because I would be up here for over an hour if I did that for the township. But I did a very kind of basic and high level overview as to the trends that you heard these folks mention and things of that nature. Right. You want to try, Gina? Do you want me to try?
It doesn't matter. Be up there talking.
All right, let's jump to the intro here quick. So it's real fast. I'm just going to go over the trends that I see from a financial standpoint. I'm going to go through some takeaways that I have on those trends, and then I'm going to present some opportunities at the highest level. And I'm going to try and do it quickly so that I'm not here too long. So let's start with these financial trends. So I went back to 2018 just because candidly that's what the supplementary info that we provided to our bond holders went back to. Gives us about a 5-ish, 6-year trend, depending on whether or not you use the budgeted number. You see some caveats in there that at the time when I did this, I did not have the audit, so I used the treasurer's report. And then I used the 24 budget, which is, as lenders, that's what we do. We don't have anything else to go off of for 2024, because obviously we're not through with 2024. So we use the budgeted number. So let's start at the top line revenue number. And what you can see there is about a 10% increase over the last 6 years, which is okay. It's not too bad, nothing to shake a stick at. But what I want to point towards specifically is from 2022 back. You see in 2022, we're at 10.4 mil. Now we're down to 9.6 mil. And let me just say, this is the general fund. And just for education levels, the general fund, think about it as like the most basic form of the governmental body and how we operate. So that includes the police department, that includes administration, that includes public works. This is what we focus on as lenders. As folks noted, we don't get into the non-major funds much more than looking at them to make sure that nothing funky is going on there. But as long as nothing is, we'll look at this. This is really what we use to determine the health of any kind of municipality, not just Cumru Township. So that downward trend there, you looked at about $800,000 downward trend. A lot of discussion around 500,000 in landfills. That's 800,000 down. So the point I want to get across there is it's not just landfill issues that are our issues. We have other things going on there. So point two is now we'll start looking at expenses. So if we look at expenses now over that same time frame, we're up about 46%. over the same time frame. Keep in mind, once again, that's a budgeted number in 24. Wherever we actually land is to be determined. But if we hit our budget, just as the gentleman here suggested, that's where we land at about 11.4 million in expenses here. So I know right away the reaction is, well, inflation is what everybody's talking about right now, right? Inflation over this time period, 25%. We're up 46%. So we have more going on than inflation. It's not necessarily a negative comment or anything like that. It's just a general comment. And one of the things I'm going to do here to save time is I'm not going to get into the whys. Because if I start getting into the whys, this is going to be a much longer conversation. I'm just going to let the numbers speak to themselves. If you mind jumping over. So taxes, the next thing that we'll jump at and we start looking at. So over the last 6 years, taxes have increased 22%. Now, if you recall back to my first slide there, where I talked about the general fund revenues being up 10%, this is everything. So this is all of the funds in here. If you boil these numbers down and just look at the general fund number is up 10% over that time period. Do you have other things playing in here, like the debt service fund, the sewer fund, so on and so forth? That also increased. If you're like most of us, like we care about the overall number, we don't just care about the general fund number when we get our tax bill. We want to just know what we're getting. So we're looking at about 22% over increase over the last 6 years. So then the next thing we go and look at as lenders is taxable valuation of real estate. You heard these gentlemen touch on it a little bit here. So taxable valuation of real estate is different than the saleable value of real estate. So what I mean by that is the tax assessed value of real estate for not just Cumru Township, but for every township is based off of in Berks County, a study that was done in 1994. That's 30 years ago. That's what they're basing the values off of. The only way those values get updated is if the county commissioners order an updated study for those numbers. I wouldn't hold your breath on that happening. So, you know, you can expect those numbers to probably hold pretty steady for the time being, unless the court would intervene and force them to do something, which may or may not happen in the future. But at any rate, what you can see there's a 2.5% decrease over that time. If you want to know how significantly different between saleable value and tax assessed value is, my house was just recently reassessed when I put solar panels on the top of it by my insurance company. It's 3 times higher than the tax assessed value of my home. So that just shows you the differences that we're dealing with here. So when I'm talking about taxable values decreasing, that's why. Even though everybody sees sales of homes going higher and higher and higher, doesn't change this number right here. So the next thing we'll do is we jump into peer comparison. So we start looking at similar townships. So what I looked at is suburban townships around Greater Red here. And those are Exeter, Spring, Muhlenberg, and Wyomissing. They're all those suburban and red type areas. First thing I'll look at is just to get comparisons. Where do we stand against our peers? That's one of the questions that we heard up here. Cumru Township, we're 33% higher than Muhlenberg, who's in second place in terms of our tax rate. Population-wise, we'll start looking at that. Is our population growing over the last 12 years? We've had 3% growth, but the national average is 7%. So we're lagging behind that. If you look at our peers, we're also lagging a bit behind there with the exception of Exeter. So we're not getting the growth there from a population standpoint. Going back into that taxable real estate, valuation of real estate that we just talked about, we know we're down. Where's everybody else at? Exeter's down. Everybody else is up. Somewhat significantly when you look at Wyomissing's number. They've done a lot of development if you've been around Wyomissing recently, particularly around the old VF area. It's helped them out a lot. And then when you start putting that number down even a little bit more, when you start looking at the commercial tax assessed value, because the more businesses pay, the less we pay as residents. That number for Cumru Township is, when I did this as 2022, was started at 22%. Gene literally gave me an updated number as of May 24. And I went back to her and asked her if it was wrong because it was so different. We're down to 17% on that number right now. A huge difference in that short of a time period. So long story short, that's more money that all of us are going to have to pay as long as those numbers are going down from a commercial standpoint. We'll put the industrial number up there just because I did. But you can see it's pretty close with 1 or 2%. It's not a huge portion of here. It is in Muhlenberg, but not for everybody else. And then one last thing I wanted to point out over there. So no, that's okay. You go ahead, see this day. So I looked at all 96 municipalities in Berks County. We're the 11th highest tax rate. And out of all 96 municipalities in Berks County. So what are my takeaways? Declining real estate valuations, lack of residential and commercial growth, and increasing expenses all happening at the same time. Not good. And that's kind of what these guys were alluding to earlier with that deficit that we're absorbing this year. We can't continue to absorb deficits like that without doing some other things. And I'll get back to what those other things could be. But you know, our tax rate, it's obviously higher than our peers. We don't want to be there. It's not a situation that any of us want to be in. And the current path that we're on right now with those numbers, it's just going to push that tax rate higher if we don't intervene in some way, shape, or form, which just kind of puts us into a vortex where the tax rates keep going up and more people keep pushing up. People and businesses keep pushing up, and then it just keeps going in a cycle that doesn't go anywhere good, basically. So what we need is to look at a couple of things. I know it's very popular to talk about cutting expenses right now. We should look at cutting expenses all the time. That's just kind of a given thing. We're not going to cut our way out of this. Like it's too big of a number. The $1.8 million we're talking about here, it's about 15% of the general fund. We can't cut 15% out of the general fund, not without getting into cutting away some bone and muscle along with the fat. You're going to get into like just some stuff you don't want to get into, basically. So we have to look at ways of correcting both the expense side and the revenue side. Right now, I haven't seen any other plans to get into the revenue side. You know, we've talked about warehouses for $500,000. $500,000 is you drop in the bucket when we're talking about $1 million. That needs to be more. And that's what I see lacking right now. So I think it's time to take action. That's what we're looking for right now. Doing nothing is not an option. These numbers are not going to get better on their own. The trends aren't going to reverse on their own. They're just going to keep going unless we intervene in some way, shape, or form. And keep in mind that not just our township, but any township is more like an ocean water. It's not like we say, okay, we're going to do this and there we go. You know, the numbers suddenly look better. It takes time, years. So we need to get moving, because the longer it takes to move, the longer it's going to take for anything to change. Let's jump over. So when I deal with these kind of situations at work and I'm talking to townships, one of the things that I always get is, well, how do I grow my township? How do I get bigger? I would say that's not the question I ask. You don't want to just grow. You don't want to take anything that comes along and throw it in your township just because it's giving you money. Because you want to make sure that you're increasing what I call the livability and desirability of a community. You want people to want to come into your community and live there. You want businesses to come in and operate their business in there. You want to foster that environment that everything kind of starts feeling better and you get a buzz and people from outside of the county want to move in here. You want to get that kind of feeling moving, not just for everyone. So how do you do that? First opportunity. You've heard us talk about water a bunch. Gene gave a great background a couple of meetings ago for folks that were here on the 222 water situation. We reached out to Chip Builder over Western Bay Berks Water Authority to talk about the water situation out there. And his position, as he explained it from Shillington's perspective, is that Shillington will run the lines out to 222, but they won't do it unless they have a developer in hand. And the reason for that is, one, right now they're servicing those clients. They don't need to run it out there to service people that they're already servicing. And two, it costs a lot of money, frankly. So if we're going to spend that money, they want to know that they're going to get the return for spending that money out there. I don't blame them for that. I would operate the exact same way if I was Shillington. Even Chief Bean talked about that a couple of months back, who's also on the board for the water authority. There's water out there. There's water out around the Lux. We just need to extend the lines to get it out there. So what we need developers, if we're going to do this, we need developers in tow to get the water out there. So that gives opportunity too. So done a lot of talking with a lot of people. I came up with 3 different teams basically that can attack this problem. I've narrowed the focus down. If you were here a couple months back, we proposed having a holistic solution with a company called CNR that would go out and do this end to end from soup and nuts all the way, you know, from start to finish this project off course. They'd also help us with things like the playground and a lot of other different things that you can talk to them about. And I stripped it down, and all we're looking at is plan, just like these gentlemen were talking about earlier here. So it's purely from a planning perspective, first step I did, if you don't mind switching to the next one, is reached out to the county commissioners. Both Commissioner Weinbach and Commissioner Santoni authorized the Bucks County Economic Development Team to work with us. They would do the 2 steps in green that I have highlighted up here, where they would do a demographic socioanalysis, socioeconomic and market demand industry analysis for our township. And then they'd also review all the existing studies that we have with the Greater Government Fund, comprehensive plan, and so on and so forth. They do all that data mining basically. That would take them a couple months, maybe 3-ish months to do that. And then what they would do then is turn around and give it to Delta Development, who's the consultant that I'm recommending to come in. Delta is going to do a very comprehensive strategic plan that's going to be their their deliverable at the end of all this. They're going to use things like having visioning sessions with the township. They're going to go out and work with all of folks like yourself and have public open houses, sit down with you, get input. What would you like to see at the township? What are we missing? What's attractive to you? What's not attractive to you? So on and so forth like that. They would do this over a period of 9 months, along with digesting all of the information that the economic development team from the county puts together, and then create this strategic plan. We would need a steering committee that we would discuss later, should we decide to move forward with this, that would have a good direction to this. But once they come up with that strategic plan, everything they come up with will come back in front of this board. And then this board will decide what we ultimately do and don't do. So we're not turning this over to outsiders. We're not just giving the keys to someone else and telling them to come up with whatever. They would develop plans. It would come back before us, and then we would decide what we do what we want to do. And that's all that stuff there. Last part of it is the back end of everything. So once we go through that process and determine what we do and don't want to do, the Greater Reading Chamber of Commerce has agreed to come in and help us out as well on the back end. So they will develop a funding plan for everything. They'll help us with getting grants. They'll help us with any sort of, I'll call it like senior politician wrangling. They'll get them to come and help us out and support our process basically. And then they'll actually start working with developers. They'll find developers, they'll bring them into the township and start enacting the strategic plan for us. Cost for all that, $63,000. The whole project will take a little over a year to finish it out. But that's what we're looking at. I think inaction at this point is not an option. No, I hope we can move forward with this. But if we can't move forward with this, I hope we have a really good alternative. But open up for questions at this point. Go ahead, Mike.
The question I had is, a few meetings ago, we talked about the water and accident setup in the problem on 22. And I think you and I, most of us agree that the 2.2 revitalization should have happened 40 years ago. And I think you will all agree with that. My question is you want to have, which I think this is a fantastic idea. I really do, 40 years ago. But how do you convince the people who own the property on 222 to sell their property to revitalize it? And how do you convince the front, the word I'm looking for is the flagship store to come in there and be a part of this? They don't, and I believe I said this numerous times, they don't want to be sitting aside of Miracle Motors, or they don't want to be sitting aside of a store to offer. I really feel that why this is beat you to it when they bought the land off the newspaper and built out why this. That was 20, 25 years ago. So how do you convince the people, number one, to come off the highway? Actually, it's number two. Number one is how do you convince the people to sell their property and have a flagship store come in here? And number two is how do you convince the people to get off the highway at that exit? This is supposed to be your showcase entrance to the township. It's not very much showcase. It was 40 years ago. And I keep repeating myself, it should have been done 40 years.
I mean, you're not wrong about that. This is what the Chamber of Commerce is really good about. It's relationships a lot of times. They're good at this. They're experts. They have the relationships with developers. They can call these folks up and they can get them in. Whether or not somebody ultimately sells, to your point, that's up to them. But when you put together bring in a large developer that puts together a significant plan, things have a way of falling in place. It's been my experience. Will everybody do it? Sure. I mean, you know, the developer out in Mexico, when they put that like Target Center together out there was one business that I don't even remember what it's called. It's some sort of like auto parts store that's still there. They just fill around there.
But you don't have, I'm sorry, you don't have a room to build around those churches that pay your tax. You don't have a place to build around here from the hookers. There is no place to expand out. It's only vertically down the aisle.
This is what developers do. So developers figure out ways to do these things. I don't figure these things out.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
this is a concern that I have.
Sure.
And this is why I bring it up and try to be transparent with you on how we really feel about this. This is why I didn't want to, I'm glad that voted no on $147,000 to have that people, help those people get in, over here months ago. I just don't see again, 40 years ago, when I was 13, when two guys left here and all the other businesses that were along 2.2, that should have been turned around right then.
And I agree with your point. I guess I would counter by saying, well, since it wasn't done 40 years ago, it doesn't mean we don't do it today.
I understand it, but I think there's a whole lot more obstacles to make it happen today versus then.
And that may be true. So let's look at worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, we spend $63,000 and nothing comes out of it. Best case scenario, we spend $63,000 and generate millions in additional revenue going forward.
That would be great for everyone. I get that, but are you willing to take that risk? And you say you are running out of gas.
I'm willing, because, and as I just said, just sitting here doing nothing just makes that deficit get worse and worse.
Well, how do you know that there's other members of the board might be doing something? It's because of the personas of the board, and lack of communication. And since we weren't, most of us weren't even aware of this presentation took 3 hours this evening's meeting. What there would be other means that we could probably develop it. It just appears to me, and it seems to be just that there's one group that follows the lead of another, and not the will of the whole township.
What's the alternatives, don't you work?
Well, sometime maybe in an executive session, we'll discuss it.
So nothing, it sounds like.
No. You want to put your money with the next paycheck on it?
No.
You talked about the 1.7 million deficit we're gonna have in this current budget. So now you want to come up with $63,000 that's not budgeted. So you're not gonna help that 1.7, you're gonna increase it. Where do you expect to get to $63 million? And if you want to have $63 million, you got, I mean, 63,000, pardon me, $63,000. If you want to get $63,000, you have to enter that in the 25 budget, not the 24 budget in July.
That's right. So you would budget in the fall for it in 25. The fee from the economic development folks from the county is $0. They would work through the end of this year.
So then this presentation we'd have to take action on it in the budget in October, not now.
Now, you would take action on the budget. You can take action to initiate the engagement right now.
But we don't have a group budget, so we can't have this expense.
There's no expense for 24.
It's comment from the last meeting that I had. Here. What's up, John? Last one, here, the last meeting I asked. Sorry. I asked, Dean about the loss of the landfill, which was $500,000, and my question was, do you have any projects or any ideas on how to, supplement that loss, that $500,000? And the answer was no.
And it wasn't just that alone. Yes, there was some other things too, but the answer was zero. So I know what you're saying about things to do and talking in the executive board. But right now, this gentleman here is at least trying to make a step forward, because the last thing you told me was there was absolutely nothing.
And I came exactly from the job. I asked all of you, and you said there were 0 projects, and you were all concerned and worried. Because I said the last thing that people of the community want is that offset to be on the backs of their taxes.
That's not totally true, because I reached out to Trader Joe's, I reached out to Costco, and I reached out to Wegmans.
But you had an opportunity to say that at the last meeting, and what I heard was 0, nothing. So unless you did that
I did that.
in the past 2 weeks,
I did that 2 years ago,
Okay.
before the pandemic, and then after the pandemic, I reached out to them again. And all 3 of them said they have a development committee, whatever they call it. And they look at demographics of what the township or the people earn in town and stuff like that. And at that time, they were not interested in coming to the township. All 3 of those, Trader Joe's, Costco's, and Wegmans, especially Wegmans. Wegmans looks at that big time.
you know, and believe me, that's the county, that's not gonna happen. And I know exactly why. They look at a lot of demographics, a lot of things. And
But I did reach out.
it's been told over time and time again, they're not coming in.
You can state your name and address.
Oh, my name is Robert Moyer, it's 516 Rural Avenue. But I'm glad you brought that up, but the last meeting, you didn't speak about that. You didn't even,
Let me just piggyback.
whether you were not listening or whatever, but now this is the first time I heard it. So let me say that.
I brought this up numerous times before people started coming to the meeting.
But okay, I mean, cold calling 3 companies and asking them to come into the township isn't the way that this works. That's not the way it happens. You needed to develop a vision, particularly with 222, as Mike brought up here. You know, people look at 222 and you've got to give them a reason to want to come. So you have to paint a vision for a large scale developer to come in there and say, here's what we want to do. You can't just pick up the phone and call Wegmans and say, hey, you want to build a store here? Like it doesn't work that way. They're going to say no every time. So this is why we need to go about it in a different way. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
We're on YouTube, so if you don't use a microphone, the people that listen to this later will not be able to understand what you're saying. So you have to use a microphone if you want to speak.
Glenn, I'm 148 Fairway Road. I've heard a lot of negativity from this room for the last year and a half that I've been coming here. And here's somebody who's trying to put some positivity. So we're talking about 4 years ago, we should have done something. And we used the word planning. This gentleman talked about planning. Mr. Batdorf, I heard you about 3 meetings ago say, we don't need planning. Can you explain that?
No, I never said that.
Yes, you did.
No, we don't have to hire outside.
Yes, you did.
Don't put words in my mouth, buddy.
I didn't say that. Anybody else didn't say no planning. Planning is not important.
Like myself, I'm a broker for 45 years. I've worked for Penn Martin Management Company, $333 million company. Don't tell me, Charlie.
Could you say that we didn't need planning?
Never.
I disagree, and I think a lot of people in this room heard. Anybody else want to?
There's a couple on the back line.
I just have a question. I know you brought up about the warehouse. What is the status on the warehouses? Because, I mean, that is a revenue bringer and I don't know, is that totally off or what is the status of the warehouses?
Well, right now, one of the warehouse, proposed properties is in litigation, so we can't expect when that will be resolved or how it will be resolved, so that's sort of just up in the air right now. There was another, plan submitted for a warehouse,
The Grimes Hill Business Park warehouse, the final plan was submitted, received a preliminary plan approval last year. The final plan was submitted and it will be reviewed at the August 5th Planning Commission meeting in this room, 6 p.m. Notices to those residents who had given us their names and contact information were sent out. The solicitor is referring to the Route 10 matter, and that is still in litigation.
Okay, and the other question I had was, how much land are we actually looking at that is actually, if it started today, how much is actually available at this point without the sale of other property?
That
Oh,
really.
sorry, it's Roxanne Miller, yeah.
So we're talking about redevelopment here. So will there be some new land? Sure, they'll do some new land. I'm not a strategic planner. That's why I'm recommending we hire people. So I can't really answer your question.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that question is impossible to answer because availability is only based on someone's willingness to sell. And that is not always reflected on an MLS listing or some other real estate listing. Sometimes people are willing to sell, but are doing that quietly in the background. Sometimes people are totally unwilling to sell. So that, I'm afraid that question cannot be answered. I agree with Mr. Miller.
One thing I'd comment on that though. We heard, and we have heard many times about water being brought in to the 222 corridor. The reason being is that in order to develop the infrastructure and attract developers, they need the infrastructure and the water supply to be there, right? So I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Chief Bean, but I think I heard Chief Bean when he was talking about the water a couple of weeks back, and saying, if you bring the water, the price of that property triples. Excuse me, I shouldn't say triples. It increases substantially.
About 40% is what Mr. Bilger talked about.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why people sell, because they can make a 40% return on the present day value of their property by turning what is underused into valuable commercial real estate that attracts people to the township, attracts other businesses in the township, and grows our economic outlook. So, no, we can't say for certain, but markets are driven by incentives, right?
I'll just keep going back that expense line, that's not going to stop increasing. Inflation is not something that's going to cease. It's going to keep going up. And our top line is coming down. If we don't do anything, like sitting in an executive session and hashing things out, like we're beyond that at this point. We need professional help.
Not to mention, I think much of this, due to the Sunshine Act, doesn't belong in executive session and belongs here in public with everyone.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thanks. We have to go forward.
My name is Sue McCoy. I live in Cumru Township, 804 Crestview Avenue, for 52 years, long time. Jean, I'd like to ask you a question about when the land, when you mentioned Grace Hill, that development, that land which the state came through. There were a lot of properties, a lot of commercial properties, and I remember those. They weren't exactly flagship properties. They were a lot of little mom and pop. And you probably assumed, and at that time, people sold land and did things based on that current time. And here we are this many years later. And now people are upset because they have their homes there and they don't want that development to go into that area. So how long ago was that land was possible to be developed for commercial purposes?
I think that one goes back, well, the first communication in relation to that was 1999, when the township asked PennDOT for a break in the limited access in the plans for the 222 South bypass that was later built in the early 2000s. PennDOT declined to break the limited access and told the township, go find a developer. Developer submitted a plan that was, sometimes it's called TEDCAR. The only manifestation of that development is the Gateway Medical Office Building off of 222. That plan received preliminary approval for a major shot, would have looked kind of like Broadcasting Square, but in Cumru Township. I think it was around the 2006 year, around the time the highway opened. It took the township 11 years to break the limited access of 222. it took that long for PennDOT to sell the right of way to allow that break and limited access to happen. And then unfortunately, the 2009, 2010, Great Recession happened. And that began the tremendous change in retail that we have all experienced. And the switch to the more logistics economy. And the developer for that plan, and it had a preliminary plan at that time, was unable to find an anchor store such as a large box store. I remember meeting with Costco and met with Walmart. They all declined. There were several other meetings to move into that location after the Great Recession. So that there was an effort to take advantage of 222 and make up for the businesses that were eliminated by 222, especially everyone in this room probably remembers Colonial Hill Bowling Alley. That was the biggest one. There were several other businesses, but that was the biggest. So is that what you were looking at?
Yes, absolutely, because I think that's an important part of this when we're looking at pieces of land that you were counting on being able to do. Maybe people sold their land at that time thinking they would be able to develop it. And now we're running into this, how many years later, where people are butting their heads up against that. So we have to be realistic about that also, that was land that we were sure, because we've lived in that area a long time, that was going to be developed a long time ago. That was kind of the outlook of that. Thank you.
And then, thanks for that. Just to piggyback off it, that's why these folks go through the analysis that they go through. Because they go through and they recommend the types of stores and the types of development that would work for our area. As much as I personally would love Wegmans to come here, the reality is Wegmans is not coming here. They're gonna recommend a nicer store, maybe it's Whole Foods, maybe it's Trader Joe's, maybe it's something that's a notch or two down below, maybe it's not even that. But long story short is they'll figure out things that are appropriate for our area that could thrive in that area. And then it's connections, the Chamber of Commerce has these connections. And I'm sure you all heard, it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know a lot of times. We're gonna tap into those. And that's why we're gonna get involved everybody.
That if everybody keeps pushing it out, it will, that you'll be saving somebody. I probably won't be.
And your point is well received.
I have thought all of you, I would love to see you work together. Everything you have to do, because you do represent all of us. Not only ones, these are big towns and very diverse and poverty, everything. So it's a lot to do that.
No, understood. That's what we need help at the end of life. Go, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Dave McCoy. I both live at and own 804 Crestview Avenue here in the township. I lived here all but 78 years, all on the 222 corridor. So where the Miracle Motors is and where Two Guys was, I'm familiar with that. One thing and Gene, I want you to correct me on this if I'm wrong. Isn't there a conduit up near Goglersville from let's see, it runs north and south. So that would be the west side coming under 222 that could transport water. Am I right or wrong?
From PA American, yes.
Yeah, for Pennsylvania American, there's a conduit under that highway that can get water there. So when we did this plan before 206, before the highway actually opened, that was a coordination with economic development here in Berks, but with the Chamber of Commerce, with the help of Mike O'Pay. And like Sue said, that was all planned out. But it all went up in the wind when the recession hit. And retail changed from box store to logistic platform. So that changed what happened there. The fellow that talked about where the lockers are, most of you don't, well, I lived near there. And when Two Guys was built in 1961, that worked great. After they went out, food chains took over. Food stores could be there because that is on a floodplain. That has no visibility. Nobody in the world would build a box store. It's not high enough. So there's those types of things, and that lower end of the corridor, thank God for Connor Delaney with his Good Life building. He put $3 million in that. And we have some trash around that. But he upgraded that. So when that whole plan from the gateway up were businesses, that was all planned out. That was gonna happen. But then the recession hit and that fell through. So now you have to alter your plans. That needs business in there. The Shillington will bring it up from the Deluxe Diner and Sturgis Pretzels and run it up the hill, and you can get Pennsylvania American Water up there to come under the highway where there's already a conduit. Then you can get that developed. But that has to be a coordination. And it has to be helped out with the school district, because they're struggling too. And we all live in the school district, and we all live in Cumru Township, and we're all paying the freight.
A lot of good points. I mean, so I guess one point to drive home, there is no risk-free plan. There's no such thing as a risk-free plan. I wish I could tell you that this is 100% going to work. I can't tell you that. Do I think it's going to work? As I've seen it work at my personal business, probably 75, 80% of the time this comes through and it works pretty well. Even if it doesn't work as well as we want it to, $63,000 in the grand scheme of things is not that large. It sounds like a very big number right now, and I'm not downplaying it, saying it's nothing. Don't take my comments out of context. But if we can generate hundreds of thousands of additional revenue, that $63,000 will seem like a bargain that nobody will remember 10 years from now.
Not yet, not to mention, it's a one-time expense.
It's a one-time
To
expense.
get recurring annual
Correct.
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. And I do, I'm gonna get to you, Richard, but I do want to touch on Dave's point about the school board. So we have what's called the knock-on effect here. So the school cannot do what we can do. The school cannot go out and develop things. They can't place things out there to increase their tax revenue and so on and so forth. Cumru Township is larger than every other township / borough in Greater Governor Mission School District combined. So as we go is how they go by and large. If we don't develop and we continue these trends the way they are, not only are we going to be increasing your taxes, they're going to be increasing your taxes. Cumru Township is the 4th largest township in Berks County. Berks County depends on Cumru Township to develop. We don't develop this. Our numbers keep going down. Their county level taxes keep going up too. So it's not just the taxes we're talking about here. That knock-on effect keeps going, and it'll hit you in 3 different ways.
I wanted to take a minute real quick to go back to Mrs. Miller's comments or about where the warehouses were, and I don't want to make this about the warehouses, but I think what we had established was give or take about a $500,000 increase in tax revenue if the warehouses were to go through.
In total, not
In total,
each,
in
yes.
total, not each, right? So I think what we established earlier was that we have a $1.7 million annual.
180, they round up.
Let's round down to be generous. But that leaves us, if both warehouses projects were completed today, with a remaining 1.2 million annual deficit. So suppose those warehouses go through, which at this point, at least in one case, the board has no authority over it. It's in the courts, and we'll see what happens there. But if both of them materialize tomorrow, we would still be left after the 10-year LRTA tax abatement expires, when we can actually start collecting tax revenue. At that point, we would still have a $1.2 million deficit. And now let's think about it. If there's 10 years, and I know there's cliffs to the LRTA, and it's not all or nothing at 10 years, but we're seeing at least the first few years of that LRTA, 0 tax benefit. So 1.7 million times 5, let's say, leaves us, where does that leave us? $8 or so million deficit.
Let's build on that. So that's if everything stays the way it is.
Right, and that's where I'm
The
going.
trends are not staying.
So
that way.
the only thing, I shouldn't say the only thing. There's a few options and levers that the township has to pull here, right? One is to raise everyone's taxes to cover that deficit. We don't want to do that. Two is to develop revenue. We want to do that. That is what we're talking about here. We want to develop smart commercial, smart commercial development that will increase our revenues over the long term. It should have been done 40 years ago. I couldn't agree with you more. We are here today and we need to start somewhere.
And we want to involve all of you, candidly, consult. That's what the consultants want to do. We want you involved. We've got a couple hands. Can Richard go first, Peg?
Yeah, I sort of know, though, I think we sort of know what that, somebody needs to explain LRTA. So that we all understand what LRTA means.
So yeah, I can just jump in that. I'm not an expert on tax law, but perhaps Kelsey maybe.
Yeah, it's a tax abatement program that the township would actually need to approve entry into for each of the developments. So I believe the Route 10 development was approved for LRTA, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Okay. But I don't believe that the Grange Hill warehouse project has even requested LRTA at this point.
Right, they have not requested.
Okay, so that development, it's remains to be seen whether they will be involved in the LRTA program or not. The Route 10 warehouse would be depending on how the litigation turns out. It's a tax abatement program that spans over 10 years. The improvements are not taxable, but the land still is. And it goes from 0% to 10% to 20% to 30%. When you get to 10 years, then they're at 100% taxable, and that continues for the rest of the time. That's the easiest way I can explain it, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Richard. You're going to lead the yeah.
I'm Rich Kepper. I'm an architect. I've worked with more developers than I can count. If you build a suitable water line over in that area, those developers will come. Those types of buildings all need fire protection systems, whether it's a large scale commercial building or an industrial building. You cannot do a fire protection system with a 3/4 inch water line.
I think somebody behind you had their hand up, Richard. Yeah.
One thing that I saw was missing badly onto 810 Crestview Ave. Is the Berks County Planning Commission. Why aren't we involving them and why are we paying a consultant instead of using our local resources?
Well, that's what the local economic development team is part of the Berks County Planning
That's
Commission.
part of it.
Yeah.
So the 63,000 is just for the consultant.
They don't do everything, the Berks County Planning Commission. So that's what we talked about with this county commissioners. They can do that front end data analysis that we're involved in. They cannot create a strategic plan for us. They cannot do the public coordination that they're going to do. And they don't have access to the same level of data. I'll leave it at that. They don't have access to the same level of data as the consultants do.
Another thing that concerns me is, I know that there's animosity on the board. We see it at the meetings and everything. But for you to publicly disparage one of your co-commissioners in the public is abhorrent.
Who did I disparage?
When he was talking about that, when he was talking about Mr. Bathrock, saying, well, obviously not you. It comes across as what we see as the worst in politics, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, this will be the last one. We have to move on. Hi, I'm Karen Friedlander. I live at 1 Forest Road. I'm just gonna give a little background. This is my first township meeting, but I also wear a hat on the Governor Mifflin School Board, and I'm also a business owner. I'm privileged to own and operate Classic Harley Davidson, which is up on Route 183, the last 26 years. But prior to me purchasing Classic Harley, it's been Terrason's Harley Davidson, which was up on the hill. So, you know, we've moved my business significantly because there was no opportunity here. But I love the fact that there's a plan. We should have had a plan, right? And we didn't, and it looks like there is a plan. And I don't really want to put anybody on the spot, but we've heard from some of our commissioners, if we don't invest the $63,000, what do we do next year? What's the plan? Yeah, so again, I appreciate the fact that something was put together to present. And I would love to hear another side. I'd love to have two plans to discuss. But in the absence of a second plan, how do we not support this drop in the bucket? We talked about this landfill that's $500,000, and somebody refers to that as a drop in the bucket, but that's not, that's significant. That $500,000 is significant, the 1.7 we're talking about, and we're looking at $63,000. That seems like a drop in the bucket and an investment that could bring some additional revenue. But I think to Mr. Miller's point, if we don't start now, where are we next year? You know, I've been in the township only 21 years. I feel like I'm the leading in the room, but I've still got kids that are here, and I just, you know, what's the plan?
I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. Thing of it is, we're gonna be back in the same cycle all the time. No matter who brings the potential developer in, is everybody gonna be able to agree to it? No, exactly. Exactly. So what
We
we have.
can't make
to do-
everybody happy,
You're,
like-
hey, you're absolutely right.
but we have to try.
Absolutely right there too.
So we have a plan to try,
And
right, if we bring the plan, the majority of the township hates it, then
regarding, and if you're familiar with 222, I know I happen to work with Personnel Associates who did the right of way and might have moved you out of here. Yeah, there was supposed to be a plan, an economic development plan back then, as we took those properties, which never occurred. But we can't look back and say, well,
no, we can't, we
we
gotta look forward.
gotta do it before, but I can tell you what I did. I put that Best Western Hotel in there with John, the deluxe, and because of my efforts, that you now have a 5-story hotel there. And there's other things that I've done to that area that I'm continuing to work on. I don't need the $63,000 to take from this township to go out and do my job.
I didn't mean to upset you by any means, I
So angry.
didn't mean to upset you by any means.
No, you didn't. I agree with you 100%.
But I'm just looking for a plan, like, I'm not gonna share what I,
Common sense solutions, that's what you're looking for.
looking for a plan.
Charles Muffy, 3 Farm Drive in Reading. I support Mr. Miller. I think his idea makes sense. And I think most of us here agree with this. We need to do something new. Nothing against you, Mr. Badger, but you take awful offense by any conversation or any mention that's not, you know, agree with. That's my sense of things.
Oh, I appreciate your comment.
I've been in multiple meetings and I see the same thing every time I come here.
I appreciate your comment.
Okay. I don't think any of us want to pay more tax. We paid 22% more tax over the last 3 years, something like that.
The last 6.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
And it will continue to increase.
Okay.
I wanted to just close this up. I think we're not gonna take any further public comment, but I wanted to just reiterate something Greg mentioned during his presentation, which is what you referred to as the vortex. And I think that's a really important thing for us to understand, which is that this is not just taxes are raised and that hurts the township and the people of the township. Taxes are raised, and then when somebody who would potentially move into our area looks at the tax rate here versus our neighboring Spring Township, Wyomissing, Exeter, and Muhlenberg, and they see a substantially lower tax rate for the same general area and the same, you know, general services, where do you think they're gonna go? And so what Greg's talking about when we're talking about a vortex is, okay, people start leaving. When people start leaving, when a business that then might come here to bring commercial tax revenue to the township, looks at Cumru, Wyomissing, Muhlenberg, Exeter, etc. Well, people are leaving, the taxes are higher. They're gonna say, where will I go? Maybe Exeter or Wyomissing has lower tax rate and people aren't fleeing the area because the taxes are skyrocketing. This is the vortex. It is a feedback loop that is gonna perpetually drive us in the direction we don't wanna go. And I think it bears fleshing out a little further, so thank you. Please take it away, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Just to wrap, I guess what we would do is, but propose a motion that Kelsey go and potentially start negotiating a contract with the developer, or not developer, I'm sorry, the consultant. So I'll make that motion. I'll second.
I, I think the goal was if this were to be negotiated, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but if this were to be negotiated into a contract that the township agreed to, it would start in 2025.
I'm Jerry's at 596 Road.
Yeah, that's correct. So we can start our engagement with the Berks County, local economic development team right away, because there's no cost to that. Then the consultants will kick in 25 and do their part. And then the Berks County, Chamber of Commerce, part of the very letting Chamber of Commerce would come in and much 20%. I don't want to pat myself on the back here, but it's not easy to get all these folks to come and agree to this. And they have agreed to help us out. They don't agree to help everybody out. So I hope we don't jump in that.
So exactly, what is your motion?
The motion was to authorize Kelsey to go and start working on a contract with the consultant. Because that's our, Kelsey's baby is already really bad. She has some things that she has to change.
I have reviewed what you said, and there are some concerns I have, but yeah, we would need to negotiate.
So she could work through that process and arrive wherever we arrive, and then once we arrive, hopefully an acceptable agreement, then we can actually break all that and get a contract.
Can I call for the vote? Mr. Bill Miller.
Move it second?
Yeah. And Mr. Donnell, seconded it.
No.
Mr. Greg Millen,
Yes.
Mr. Badger,
No.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Rao. Yes. And to clarify, just want to make sure that we understand for future, if negotiations are unsuccessful or whatever the results of the negotiations will come back as a board. Yes.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the public, we have 5 people signed up, and I'm thinking they're probably about the refuse bill. How many people are here to comment about the refuse bill? No, just one person? Okay, because, Keene, you did mention that we might want to make a statement before public comment, where you can still want to do that. I presented information to the board, by email. If the board wants me to read that out, or if you want to hear public comment first. That's okay, we'll hear public comment. So there's Leonte. Okay, so that is good. How about Will Myers? Is Will Myers? I don't know. I didn't know you. Yeah, come on up and state your name and your address, please.
Okay, Will Myers.
So he's speaking today.
What's your address?
222 John Manhattan.
Name's Will Myers. I got to take notice, like, I love to see. So I got this thing, it's like notice saying that my bill has to. Did I get it? Go to town. And I requested, wait, because I didn't get the invoice. I was told that it doesn't really matter whether I got the invoice or not, because it was due, and I should know that. I should know that I'm supposed to pay a bill. And I should just pay it. And I said to them that, they said that there was a thing on the township, the last meeting, that, you could go look at, and I did. Well, I realized I wasn't the only one that didn't receive the bill. So they're trying to tell me that I threw it away, or I missed it. Or I don't really care. I don't really care what happened. I know I didn't get it. Okay, then I find out that there's 13% didn't get their bill. Okay, well, obviously, I don't think there's 800 people or 13% that threw it away. And you're saying, okay, well, maybe the post office. Okay, well, we got the post office and the mailman had to take it. You're saying there's a whole bunch of mailmen that didn't deliver it correctly.
You know, I just think something happened. I don't know if it happened here, maybe it didn't print, maybe it didn't get to the post office. You can say you mailed it, you know, it doesn't matter what postage you put on it when I mail a letter. You can't tell me that you mailed it to me. You can't tell me that you mailed it to anybody else in the community, okay? So when I go in there, I'm expecting common courtesy, common respect. I'm expecting to go in there and say, hey, you know what? I didn't get the bill, you know, I want to pay it. And, you know, you can look at my record, you can look at my tax bills, you can look at my record, you can look at my past experience, you can look at me individually. No, township didn't want to do that. What they wanted to do is they wanted to start playing the blame game. It's your fault, you had to throw it away. Your neighbor got the bill. I don't care who got that big bill, I'm telling you, I didn't get it. Now, why would I lie? Now, okay, so April 1st is that bill was past due. You sent me a letter 101 days past my past due. That letter's dated July 11th. You couldn't send me a notice. You couldn't send me something back in April 1st saying, hey, you know what? They had people to get that bill. You know, I'm gonna give you 2 weeks notice, you know, to pay it. Okay, now you're saying, well, everybody else is gonna, you know, what are we gonna do with the people that we already paid that late fee? Well, if somebody paid the late fee and they ain't calling you up because they didn't get a bill, maybe they actually got a bill and they're paying late. I can't explain what someone else did. All I can tell you is what I did. And when all these people are coming in here and upset, you couldn't look, people in the township couldn't look my record up and say, hey, she pays her bill every time within the first week she gets it. Maybe the only way she probably didn't get it for some reason. Nope. No common respect, no common courtesy. That's what we're upset about. And then you want to say, you put down, you gotta give this to a collection agency. Seriously? I got late fee and then you're telling me you waited 101 days to do that. Somebody's not doing their job because who sent the late notice 101 days after it's like, seriously, think about that. Is that for accounting purposes? Accounting? I mean, I took care of accounting for years. That's poor. Pretty poor. I think we deserve a little bit more respect. That's all. Thank you. Gail Ferrazzo. See your name and address, please.
Hi, Gail Perazzo, 43 Harry Avenue. And I was going to say this comment, but I want to say it now. On April 11th, my neighbor, 45 Harry Avenue, their house burned down to the ground. We live next door, and I just, with Calvin Crest getting inducted tonight, he was the first on the scene. When I called 911 at 2:30 in the morning, he was there at 2:35, you know. So, you know, I've been meaning to come by and say, the fire department was there at 2:40. So, they couldn't save that house, but they saved mine, even though I had $64,000 worth of damage to my house. They were there and able to save my house, or it would have gone up too. So I got a little emotional because I saw them being inducted, and I wanted to thank the Cumru Township. And I think there were 8 other fire departments there that saved our house and put that fire to bed. So thank you. But the reason I'm here tonight is I just wanted to ask. I live at 43 Harriet, and my backyard goes up into the area that is being used for dumping grounds and everything. And when I called the township, they said it was going to be used for the dirt for the new fire company. But in the meantime, it's been 2 different times that they've started to dump. And I have pictures of the items that are being dumped there. And I have some concerns. So I just wanted to know if anybody could update me on what's going on. I have not only is there road debris and macadam there, but there's also now piping and metals and things being dumped there. And I just was concerned when I called, I was told it was only going to be dirt. So I didn't know if anybody could address that, or maybe make a time that I can come in and talk to somebody about that. I've called twice about it And only one time they said, and then inquiring other.
Do you have any comment from?
We're continuing to use that dump site for right now, the Cedar Top Road job. I do know they do segregate the metal out and pipe, manhole lids. Sometimes you've seen dumpsters up there where they're actually pulling it out.
Yes.
They'll take the scrap metal away. When you see the old bucket of manholes, it's concrete, it's all, organic stuff. We're not bearing any kind of organics there. That's what our waste site is for. And to date, it saved us well over $1 million in tipping fees at the landfill.
And I understood that when I called them, I understood that they would do that, but if.
And we have softened, yeah,
You're seeing.
Yes.
What I'm seeing from my, I'm a little concerned.
and they pushed it back one time, they covered up a lot of that stuff, they'll push it back again. The plan is to plant trees on this when we're done, to seed it. And it's work in progress, and then some days it looks really ugly, like you're showing there. And then they push more nicer material, topsoil over, and then they dump some more.
Okay, so you are telling me they're checking for materials that are being there that are safe and secure for all the children in the area and things like that.
And yeah, we don't want anybody playing on it, it's not pretty steep slope. They did soften the slope a month or two ago, the one edge was pretty steep. They softened that, but it's a work in progress.
Okay, can you anticipate any time of ending this, or is this going to be a continual, hey, I'm all for getting money for Cumru Township, but I would like it not to affect
The
them.
Cedar Top job is gonna go on for another couple months, and then it'll take some time to get that covered up and pushed aside.
Okay.
And we are working on a separate, site for storage of those materials down off of, Upper Neck Road. We're still in the problem, we've got the permit, but we're in the process of getting that, secured and silt fence and things installed.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike Geschbach. Please state your name and your address.
Mike Eshbach, 807 Cameron Street. A couple weeks ago at the meeting, my actions, were not what they should have been. I'd like to offer my apologies to, the commissioners, to everybody that was here, especially, Commissioner Donald. Whether, while I apologize for the way I said it, I do not apologize for my stance and my beliefs. But I do apologize for the way I brought them across. So I do have respect for the township and commissioners that work here. I better have some respect for it. I do apologize for the way I brought them across. And for anybody who is offended the way I brought them across in the audience or on the panel, again, I apologize.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
That'll be it. Thank you.
Last up, I have Robert Moyer. State your name and your address, please.
My name's Robert Moyer, the address is 516 Brill Avenue. I just wanted to, my wife and I did receive our trash bill, but we were on the other side and did not receive the sewer bill. I did bring that up at the last meeting, so there is some anomalies that we have going on here. And again, I'm not sure if it's out of this office, or it's out of from the postal service. But I will tell you, as I stated before, I worked for the Postal Service for almost 31 years, and I know things happen. But I guess what I wanted to ask was something about the penalties. It's not really the bills. We know something's happened. We know they're getting lost somewhere in the system. So the trash bill is only once a year, correct? I believe. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so far. And the sewer bill is 4 times?
Yes, quarterly.
Okay, so there still is an opportunity for this to happen again with the sewer bill, since we're outside the trash thing. So my question is, or maybe my advice would be maybe someone from the board or someone from the administration side. If we want to find out whether it's coming from the postal service or here, maybe someone needs, as I suggested before, go talk to postmaster Mosley or the postmaster of Reading, who controls Shilling, and just find out that there was some kind of problem with those mailers, because it's not a lot, it's 800, I believe, we sent out. If I'm not
The
mistaken.
838 notices were sent out on July 11th. The number of refuse bills were, as I stated at the last meeting, refuse and SMP bills, that's the septic fee, are sent out at the same time. There are a total of 6,292 accounts. However, the refuse and SMT accounts are consolidated on one bill when they're for the same property. So 5,224 bills were sent electronically to the printing mechanism and on our mail machine, because you had suggested looking at the mail meter.
Yes.
Over 6,000 pieces, 6,095 pieces were posted in January from the mail meter. That includes the 5,224 refuse and SMT bills, a mass mailing to all of the businesses in the township about recycling, which is required, the required function, and various correspondences having to do with the refuse fund. So I believe that the appropriate number of pieces were posted, and they are hand carried to the Moton Post Office by one of the staff members, because the Moton Post Office wants them handed over the counter. They are not given to the postal person. They're actually hand delivered there. And that's all I can tell you.
Is that the same for Shillington also? Because you've got.
No, we have to go where the meter is from. The meter is out of Moton. All of our metered mail has to go through Moton.
Okay. So taking everything there.
That's correct.
As I mentioned before, you're paying for that metered service.
Correct.
And if that service isn't being provided by the post office, then that's where I said someone should be talking to the postmaster. Say, hey, we paid for this, we're not getting the service. We need you to take a look at this and make sure that that doesn't happen again. Because you do have, even coming out of that Moton post office, that's getting divvied over to Shillington. You have a lot of carriers involved. So, in different places, different routes. This isn't just one guy messing things up. This is, different addresses, different blocks, different people. So, and you had a conglomeration of people last meeting at the different areas that it was happening to. So, again, maybe that's a place to start. Just ask them, hey.
That line of discussion has been unproductive.
I'm sorry for that, but believe me, I've been frustrated with them too, over the years. But anyway, what I wanted to ask was the penalties, that people are paying, when they don't get the bill, they come in. I think you stated that the penalty goes to the refuse fund.
Yes, so
Okay.
it's, as you heard the auditor saying earlier in the meeting, that's one of our specialized funds.
Right.
Expenses and revenue having to do with refuse or trash and recycling are all funneled in and out of that fund.
Okay, because I wanted to just ask, with those penalties also last year when we had the trash company, the new one came in and that debacle happened. I know, if I'm not mistaken, they were fined about $24,000.
That's correct.
Across the 5 zones. So that money also went into the trash.
That was not revenue. That was decreased expense. That was deducted from their later bill.
Okay.
So
you had to pay to them, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
The major expenses out of the refuse fund are approximately $30,000 a month in dumping fees, and that varies. We have to pay the landfill an amount per ton for everything that all of us dispose of. So that is, and it's about $30,000 a month, and it goes up at Christmas time, of course. But that can vary. And then the other major expense is the hauler, and this year's contract is right around exactly $1 million for the hauling, and that is divided up monthly. But there are other expenses that come in and out of the refuse fund. Obviously, the billing expenses, whether it's the postage, the card stock, the time of the staff that it takes to do that. The, also all the leaf picking from the second week of October through 9 weeks or until the first snowfall, first significant snowfall. All of that time that the gentlemen in Public Works spend picking leaves is also out of the refuse fund. Maintaining the equipment, the leaf pickers is out of the refuse fund. So there are a significant number of other expenses that the refuse fund has to maintain.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions. Where exactly is that money that's being held there? For what uses? You think you covered that? The other thing I wanted to ask was the 400 repeat offenders that you have out of that, that 800 targets that we were talking about last meeting. What percentage, maybe you know or don't know, of those people never pay the bill, or do you get that covered at least sometime during the year?
Whether it's, I can't tell you about never. Many times the solicitor's office helps us with this for both sewer and refuse. We have to lien properties, and sometimes the township does not realize that revenue until the property is sold. That's very frequent. So I can't tell you, I can't give you an evaluation about using the word never. However, for any utility, there are some that you cannot turn off. Cannot turn off sewer. You cannot turn off refuse, because that creates a trash problem of its own. So for any utility or service that you cannot turn off, there are going to be a certain percentage of people who do not pay. And that's where collections comes in, that's where leaning properties comes in. However, something that is common among utilities is that you still owe, if you're receiving the service, whether or not you found your bill, and I'm not going to get into the debate about who received it and who didn't, the amount is still owed. For example, sewer. Even if someone doesn't receive a bill, they're still receiving that service. And it's understood that they still owe to pay that service. So one of the issues, and I believe Chief Bean had mentioned this to the board at one point, is that you cannot, it is not productive to turn off refuse service to a property, because that creates code problems for the neighbors. You have an accumulation of trash, and that brings in vermin and other problems. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with, sometimes there are hoarding properties which become codes issues in and of themselves. Sewer is one of those services. You cannot turn it off, or you have a public health problem.
Right. I don't think it's an issue of people not wanting to pay the bill. I think most people do. I think what the problem that where they have the problem, and this was discussed last time, was getting tapped the penalty for that not happening in most cases. And I had brought it up, but it would be a major expense, and we discussed it. There is no thing like with credit cards set up and stuff like that, where you have a warning that comes through your email, where you get a text that says, hey, you have 5 days to pay this bill, you have 10 days to pay this bill. My wife and I have a couple things set up that way. So in case we forget, we're all human, we do forget, we don't get hit with penalties. So I think that's the biggest problem, or the biggest gripe that people have, is not that they don't pay the bill, but they will show up and do that, whether it's credit card, check, or in person, it's getting hit with the penalty. I think that's the major thing. How do you come up with something to remedy that situation? So that doesn't happen. You have more irate people coming in, every time they don't get a bill. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same people. It could be that a fresh 10 faces could be in here complaining about that.
Thank you, Ron.
Since we work at a post office, couldn't we just, Gene, do we go to another nearby next post office?
No, you can't do that.
No, I'm just asking, I really don't know.
She's correct. It's where the meter is out of. You have to go to that one. You have to reestablish something else with a different post office. And you don't want that going very far anyway. You want to try to keep it in the area. So, I think that's, oh, something that's, if you bear with me, very quickly. Just wanted to bring this up, because I found this out when I moved into the township, 3 years ago. I saw there was that $14.70 or 90 cents personal tax. And I just questioned it because I'm paying something, I'm just that kind of guy, I want to know what that is. And it took a while, but I did get the answer from one of the past commissioners and did look into it, found out. So if you're not aware what that is, that was established a long time ago. I mean, a long time ago. This board and the previous board were not responsible for it. I was told it was actually the Berks County Commissioners that had to go through them for that per capita tax. And from what I was told, if you don't know where that splits and where it goes to, Cumru Township gets a little bit of that, not much, but you get a little bit of that. And the other
$5.
Yeah, $5. And the rest goes, so this might make it a collective grown, but the rest goes to the school. So you're already paying the school tax, and on top of that, they're getting more tax from that. But I think I know the reasons why that was done, and that has to do with development in the area, not enough people, when the schools were built and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm sure that the board way back probably went to the commissioners and said, we need more money. So I'm sure that's how that came back. Yeah, it's just an FYI, in case anybody wants to know what that was about. Okay, well,
That is
thank
good
you.
to know.
Yeah, I said Sam found that out. I guess he didn't know. A lot of people are like, what is this? You know, I've been paying it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What is this? That's what it is. So I just way back. Just have one more question, since there's a lot of people that have lived here for a long time. Where the Your Place restaurant was, this is on the lighter side. What was the business that was there before Your Place restaurant? My wife is trying to find that out, and one of the neighbors. They said it was some kind of seafood place in the 70s. Yeah.
Next to what was the AMP, before the Walgreens, it was Blockbuster, and way before that, I think
Yes.
that was that an AMP?
It was on the end where Your Place restaurant was.
Right,
We were
so-
trying to figure out what was there in the 1970s.
So, Mr. McCoy, do you remember what was,
No, so Your Place was not. We tracked it. Your Place was only there for 37 years. They were there through 1994.
Blankenbiller's
In
Diner?
fact, I looked it up and I found out when Your Place got in there and when they went out. There was an article that I found. They were there for 37 years. So what did you think was there? Oh, okay. Anyway, I just thought somebody would know. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Well, Gene, since we were talking about, the refuse, and you have that as item A under administration, is there anything else that you wanted to add to what you said?
No, it's strictly up to the board what you want to do. You are aware of my questions. If the board wishes to grant a waiver of the late fee for all those who received the July 11th notice, the board needs to also give guidance to administration if you want to waive the late fee for anyone else who paid the late fee from April 1st through July 10th. And then the board will have to deal with questions about anyone else, whether it's a future refuse bill, a future sewer bill, about whenever somebody says they lost their bill or they, were never sent their bill, how do you wish us to respond? One other item is if you waive the late fee for the July 11th notice people or anyone else, there have been 133 property settlements from April 1st on, and during those settlements, somebody paid a late fee. Do you wish us to attempt to track down prior property owners and deal with that?
I wanted to just quick comment on one part of that. I think there's a lot else to unpack, but one thing I think with regard to future issues, I think the biggest takeaway I have from this is, I want to make very clear, I do not blame our administrative staff. I think they did their jobs. And they did, I don't think the mistake, I'm confident that the mistake wasn't on their end. We have a crack team, Peg and even the women in my left here will attest to it. They have been working together for decades, more, at least 2 decades in some cases. They do a very good job. Our ladies run a tight ship. With regard to the future incidents, what my biggest takeaway here is I think we need to figure out how to better communicate. And perhaps that's with a technology strategy, or perhaps that's with a mailer at the beginning of the year that says, here is www.cumrutownship.com/bills that says the schedule of all the bills for the year, some mechanism by which we can communicate to the residents, not just, hey, this bill is due this date, but here's how you can always stay up to date with whatever your bills are. So I think there's communication strategies that we can talk through and figure out to help address and remediate that can make a perpetual problem. I think there's more to unpack there though.
I just want to comment on that. If you send out the calendar every year. Why not put it on there? Maybe the recording sewer bill, the date of the correct.
I think that's a good idea, because we do keep that calendar on our, maybe we do it on our refrigerator, so we know what recycling week it is, right? We can maybe.
Thank you. There are so many people who tell us that they throw it out. So thank you for those of you who see.
Put it on my phone for a minute.
Two quick things. I also had I'm at Hobbs, 409 Valley Stream Road. I also had the pleasure or displeasure of working for the post office, and all kinds of stuff happens. You will not get a response because, quite honestly, I'd say 90% of them really don't give a hoot. So I would write to Congresswoman. If you call Congress, oh man, that gets to be a big hoo-ha. And then the postmaster is on the hot seat, and maybe, just maybe, he'll address it. The other thing is, I understand there was a big discussion about all the bills last time I wasn't present. Wasn't it simpler? And I don't know this, why we changed to individual bills to just leave it in the tax bill? Was there, because then you would eliminate sending bills, printing bills, card stock, postage. You know, if it worked for all those years, what changed and why did we change it? Thank you.
It was actually not in accordance with the first class township code to do that, even though the county allowed it. And I know that some other municipalities do it. And also the tax collector was not being fairly compensated for work that she was doing, because when she collects that money, she has to redistribute that money to the township. So those are the two reasons why that changed.
Why not just give her a raise? It sounds like it was simple.
That's not in accordance with the first class township code. That's the problem.
One of the things that we talked about last time is how do we compare this to other funds? Did you want to say?
Yes, I would like to say one thing. As a resident also of the township and also your treasurer, I'm very concerned that if you start here with this, what are you going to do for all of your residents who did pay on time? Are you going to give compounded interest back to them? They paid on time. Everybody else is getting extended time too. I mean, where does it begin and where does it end? Where does it end? I have a lot of people that paid and came in here right in January. What do I tell them? If they call us on the phone and say to us up at the staff of the, we pay our bills too all the time and we paid it in January. Now you're letting people pay till August. What am I supposed to do with them? Also, what explanation am I to give them? Are we going to give them compounded interest back? Are we expected to write them a check? But I'm going to need answers for something like that because they also owe or should be owed an explanation. And believe it or not, I am one of those people. So I would like to know too, you know, what do you want us to do?
Okay. Thing of it is I understand if somebody got the bill, okay, that's they got the bill. You got the bill. I didn't get it. I didn't throw it away. I didn't miss it. You know, and I got told it came out in the last year in March. Okay, March is that was the first year it came out, and it was pretty. So, okay, 1 year does not make a president. 1 year does not make a president. So technically, you send it out in January this year. Okay, so maybe I will look for it in March. I'm saying we're looking for it. When I get the bill, and I would not throw a town bill away because it's a postcard. And I asked, was it a postcard? I got the calendar that tells me when the.
We're gonna have to move on.
But yeah, but when you're saying about dealing with other people, if you got the bill, if I would have gotten that bill, and a lot of other people, if we would have gotten it, we would have paid it. So if you got the bill and you paid it, that's great. Why would you owe anything else? And why would you begrudge anybody else that said they didn't get the bill? What are you lying? That's what I'm
I
saying.
understand what you're saying.
Wanted
I understand.
to quickly respond to Peg's comment. I think it's a really totally legitimate question you ask is what do you say to the people who paid early? I think should something like that occur, you tell them to come here and you don't take up the fight. You send them to the board and say, come to the meeting. That's what I would suggest.
One of the things that we talked about last time is comparing this to our sewer bill, so on and so forth. How many, are we able to do that? Like, we saw 13% of people didn't pay the trash bill. Do we have 13% of the people not pay the sewer bill too?
Let me see what I have.
What I'm trying to figure out is this the norm or is this an anomaly?
We have quite a bit of outstanding debt on sewer bills. In the last reading on July 26th in collections, we have 957 sewer accounts out of approximately 4,900.
I assume that's over time, probably there's to be multiple sewer bills in there that are getting captured.
Those are the accounts. There are multiple, usually the individuals and the accounts that are sent over to collection are sent over repeatedly. But those are separate individual accounts, not one account and they were sent over 3 times. Those are individual accounts.
I guess what I'm trying to back into is we send our sewer bill out and I'm making up the month March. How often do we get to 15% of our people don't pay until they get into that late fee period for March?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I am unsure. I didn't work out the percentages. We send over I'm not sure if this is what you're asking. We send over to collections about twice a year.
Yeah, I'm not getting into the collections, but on the sewer bill, when is the late fee assessed on that? That's after how many days?
30 days. So the bill is sent out in February, it's due in March. And then 2.5% is assessed, and 2.5% times 4 quarters is 10%. 10% was the late fee on the refuse bill.
Right. Let me just try to understand. Are you saying 10% of the time people pay past the 30 days?
Oh, I don't know. No, I'm saying it's a 2.5% interest rate for non-payment of sewer after 30 days, and that penalty is added to the next sewer bill.
Okay.
And then we have 4 sewer bills per year. So if you didn't pay for an entire year, you would rack up a 10% approximately penalty.
So it sounds like this is something we don't track, is what I'm believing.
We can't, I did not bring all of the sewer data with me. We have lots of data upstairs, but I was focused on refuse.
Yeah, the challenge is, this is a hard situation, right? I mean, you obviously had a group of people, to Gene's point, that didn't pay on time and then did pay in that April, July period. They obviously got the bill, they paid it at some point. So, you know, that kind of eliminates that portion in my mind. You know, they're not really employed. They got the bill, they paid it like, they ended their debt, they paid the late fee, it's outside. You have another group that falls into this July group, that a good portion of them are coming in and saying, I didn't get my bill. I can't determine where the problem went. It doesn't seem like anybody can determine where the problem came up. It just seems like there's a problem. In the absence of being able to determine what it is, you have to come up with some sort of solution, and it comes to fairness, in my opinion. I mean, you can't, it's harsh to penalize somebody if they didn't get their bill, and obviously we can't go around and verify people telling us it's true and whatnot and so forth, but it's hard for me to fathom that we've got 400 some households that typically pay on time, that aren't paying this on time for some reason. That's what I'm struggling with here.
Well, it's obvious that they didn't get the bill, but regardless, it doesn't negate their responsibility to pay it.
And nobody's debating that they don't need to pay, and I think that's what we've heard here. It's, they deserve to pay a late fee if they didn't get the bill. That's the question.
Yeah, but if they had the responsibility to pay the bill as they normally did, like most do, then I wouldn't be in that position. You still owe it. I pay my cable bill when I don't get the bill. I know I still owe the money, even though I didn't get the bill from the post office.
But do you get that bill by paper, or do you get it sent to you by?
I get it paper.
Thanks, we still-
No, I didn't get a bill a couple of times. That's my point. I still owed it. I still knew I had it. It was my responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to take personal responsibility.
When this is, and you're new to the board, and you are right, correct?
And I understand.
Okay, you've been here for a while, so let me ask you this, up until that point, have you ever seen percentage that large, 13% or higher of bills that people paid to you in here? Or
I agree. No, no, the post office was never that incompetent.
Yes, I worked for 37.
We did a great job while you were there.
You don't know, trust me on that, what you said, people don't know your business, we don't know that, but anyway, I'm just asking, so this definitely proves that that's an anomaly. This was not normal, and it only seemed to happen after it was split. Someone saying, when the trash was separated.
Yeah, and we had it to.
You did, I know,
By law.
I understand, that it just seemed to happen from that happened. And I'm just curious as to how many of that 13% have paid that trash bill in the work. I'm just, you know, I mean, you probably don't know that date, but I'm just wondering.
No, that's, I don't have that.
Yeah, you have to really go into a deep thing to see how many people had actually elsewhere, paid elsewhere, and now that it got separated.
Yeah, that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility really is to just get that out and to hire a competent mailer. And it didn't happen. And now we should hold it. We can, and now I appreciate one gentleman's or lady's comment about contacting Houlihan's office, and they can put some, a foot to the fire.
That may be the answer, but I know you're talking about incompetent mailers, but then you're talking about why a lot of carriers, why don't a lot of mail carriers that do it with post office, and quite a lot of routes.
Yeah.
That's where I have a problem.
Cumru Township has 6 zip codes.
And I really,
So if it's spread out amongst those 6 zip codes, amongst all those carriers, with different supervisors, different postmasters. It's kind of weird, don't you think?
And I'm just gonna.
And I'm not pointing fingers at you guys, you did what you did, I'm just saying, look, you paid for a service, it wasn't done.
I'm just gonna speculate here and say, even if we go ahead and invest resources in pursuing the answer, we probably won't find the answer. Right, so I guess to piggyback on what Greg is saying, and what I said, to reiterate what I said before, I think that the solution isn't trying to turn back the wheel of time and figure out. I don't think that's possible here. I think our administrative staff did their jobs and something happened, right? So rather than focusing on what happened, I think that's going to be a waste of time and resources. We need to figure out how to prevent this from happening in the future. And I think we need to figure out how to address it in the present for those that were affected.
But I think that gentleman right there had a good idea of what you're talking about, maybe saying insert something that has those dates And then I reviewed that people can take personal responsibility. They have to pay for the well aware of the times, the well aware of dates. This one has to be, so it's a nice big advance notice. You know, so that's something to help. I'm not gonna say that's your own, it's something.
Thank you.
That was also 443 Taylor's Drive. We are 2 hours into the meeting and not even half the first page of the agenda. Can we please move on? Anyway, please.
So in an effort to move this along, a couple notes that I took here personally, we can digest them by in a singular fashion, or we can just kind of go through the whole thing. My suggestion is going to be for that block that we were talking about, the people that received that July 1st letter, the waive their late fees for anyone that pays that bill before September 30th. And if somebody got that July 1st bill and paid the late fee, that would include returning their fees. Send another letter to those people that haven't paid, that are in that July 1st group, and let them know that we'll delay sending the collections until 9:30 so that they can pay their bill without getting assessed a fee. If they pay after that, then they get a late fee. Starting in 2025, send a letter out to citizens that haven't paid 30 days before the late fee assessment happens to let them know that, hey, if you don't pay within the next 30 days, you're gonna get it with the late fee. Similar to this year, keep it the practice of the July 1st letter so that people know before they go into collections. One of the things I want to kick around here with, maybe Andy wants to tackle this, maybe somebody else, but I would say that we should just come up with some sort of proposal for enhancing the township website by the end of 2024, outlining potential enhancements to the website. Enhancement explanation should include, but not be limited to, better user experience, online payment portal, and notification/messaging service. And then just to finalize this, send a letter out to the people that received the July collections letter that did pay after receiving this letter, informing them that there was a problem that occurred at some point, that the board has decided to refund their fee, give them their feedback, and then outline the other things that we were doing to try and kind of ease the tensions that are going on in the township. That's a lot. You don't have to memorize all that. I can send it over to everybody.
I need to break out a couple of things. One, you use 2 different dates for the due date for paying. You use September 1 and September 30th. Which one do you want?
It should be September 30th. I said 1, I misspoke.
Second, the online payment portal is a big ask it's a costly ask. And a little bit of background, the reason we don't do that, I know that some municipalities do, and I'm not saying the board will tell me what the board wants, but the previous board made the decision not to do that because of the cost involved and the cost, those fees, and I'm sure Mr. Donnell is intimately familiar with those fees, sometimes called PCI fees, get passed on to all the customers because the fund itself has to cover those fees. And the previous board made the decision that they did not want to do that. So that is a steering the battleship moment. We would have to get proposals from different companies that do that sort of service. In regard to a 30-day, hey, you're about to be late, we can talk about that, but and certainly the calendar can be altered. With the calendar, one of the pages of the calendar is a required stormwater notice. We have many requirements for notifying the public. We can take that notice out of the calendar and use that for this purpose. Then we will have to budget for an additional notice to all the residents about stormwater because that's a requirement that we have. That comes out of the general fund. Let's make sure, can we break this down? Let's take the first part. You want to waive late fees for anyone who received the July 11th notice if they pay before September 30th. Is that midnight or close of business? Because believe me, people will,
Let's go close the business.
Close of business, which is, for the audience's sake, 4:30 p.m. on a business day. Is September 30th a weekday or is it a weekend? I don't have a calendar in front of me. Yes.
Monday.
Monday.
4:30 on Monday, September 30th. We will send out a notice to all those individuals who received a July 11th notice that they have that grace period. We will refund late fees to all those who have paid those late fees. I need to know, I need some kind of words, hopefully the solicitor can craft them for us, about without prejudice and precedent.
Yeah, I can help craft those words for you. I think there needs to be a motion on this too, though, just.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, but I wasn't sure if you wanted it.
You want to break it up? Yeah.
I'd like a separate motion on this particular aspect of things.
All right, so, like I said, I've got the motion to waive all late fees for folks that received the July 11th letter, as long as they pay before 9:30 and refund anyone that has paid that received the July 11th letter. That's my motion. I don't know. I probably did a poor job of that.
Close of business.
Close of business.
Is there a second?
Oh, I second.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Backdoor,
No.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
No.
Ms. Rao.
Yes.
Thank you. And, of all the items that you listed, Mr. Miller, I'm not sure if they all need motions at this time.
I think the policy considerations that you were talking about with when the letters and stuff should get done out, that can just be done in a resolution or as a township policy moving forward.
Thank you. And then the issue of if this board wants to look into paying bills online, that's a much bigger ask. That we cannot even deal with that here. For everyone's information, when someone goes on to target.com and you want to pay your bill, that information is resting out there somewhere in the universe. And that information has obligations to protect it. We all know that there have been data breaches. The township is under the same obligations. Last year, the state of Pennsylvania enacted a statute that requires municipalities to be governed under the same data breach laws as a business like Target. So that doing that method of payment involves other risks, which increases cyber insurance. We do carry cyber insurance, but it increases that risk and also increases the fees because of every financial transaction. It goes from one server to the next server, that's a fee, to the next server, that's a fee, to the bank service, that's it. So every time a bolus of money travels electronically, there are fees associated with that. And those fees would get rolled into the cost of the fund. So that's a big ask. We do have credit card. You call in, you can use a credit card. You come into the office, square. But that's definitely something I would have to work with Mr. Donnell.
So this motion that we just passed, there's a commissioner that did not pay on time and he had a late fee. Was he getting his money back?
We would have to, how do you want to deal with that, Kelsey?
Because how can he vote for getting a late fee back for himself? That to me is a little unethical.
If that was me, it may have been, I would happily exclude myself if it was me.
So this kind of issue would fall under the Public Official and Employee Ethics Act. And I did look into it to determine whether or not it would be a conflict for anyone on this board who got their late fee back or got it waived to vote on this. And I don't believe it's a conflict because it has a very de minimis economic impact. And it affects an entire subclass of the public within the township, to which the public official belongs, because of the number of people that we're talking about.
But to be clear, is that me? I mean,
I don't.
Did you get a July 11th letter?
It was me.
Yes, that was you.
Okay, so in that case, can I make a motion to amend that previous motion and explicitly exclude me? Because I agree, I don't think that's right. I shouldn't be able to vote.
Oh, that's unethical.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I did not know we were late on it. I'm sorry. So I'm more than happy to exclude myself from that.
Actually, you weren't late on the July 11th, you were late originally, so are we addressing any of the other lateness?
No.
Okay,
you
then the
touch
issue goes
on that
away.
first one, yeah, it's just people that got that July 11th, but it sounds like you didn't get the July 11th.
No, you did, you were late earlier in the year.
Yeah, so you don't fall into that category,
Okay,
you don't get late.
So if the board is not,
Yeah.
if the board is not addressing any other late fees, then that matter is closed. And I believe you're not addressing any other late fees, is that correct? These are the only late fees you're addressing?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a question, just mention the credit card. Is it true, you charge for that? Is there a fee for using the credit card?
Yes, every time you use a credit card, anywhere, there are fees. Most businesses don't tell you that. There is a legislation being considered on the state level now that those fees must be disclosed, whether or not you are conscious of them. We do disclose those fees to callers, when people call in to use their credit card, we disclose that right up front and tell them exactly what their fees are. So we're actually ahead of the statute.
Like someone had mentioned that, and I wasn't sure.
Okay, let's move on to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Anything? Okay. Mr. Batour,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yeah.
Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Rao.
Yes. Okay, Chief Winchester.
Page 2 of the agenda. All right. So the only thing on the agenda that I have is National Night Out, just to provide an update. It continues to be on August 6th. We are moving forward with getting various events scheduled and planned. The fire department, Chief Bean, in his busy schedule, finally got back to me and was able to confirm that we will have some firefighters there and for everyone to be able to touch a truck and get in and out and turn the lights on. Tower Direct will also have a rig there. Like I said, we'll have plenty of police there and we're gonna have, more than likely, I believe the state championship baseball team, some members there, sign autograph for the kids. The school board did reach out about helping out participating, so we would invite them as members of the community. And we will have Diamond's Federal Credit Union as a partner, Giant as a partner, Burke's Hot Dogs. So it's moving forward. It should be a good time, and I expect it to grow as years go by, as years come. That's all I have.
Thank you. Chief Bean, Fire Department.
All right, thank you. I'll make this real quick. Yeah, hiring's moving along. Just about done with backgrounds. Thank you to Chief Winchester, the staff, and detectives. And we're looking to get these guys into the academy for August 19th. So other than that, I'm not going to lengthen the meeting.
We covered item A, so item B, we have a plan that has a planning escrow balance of $2,002.59. And the motion would be to refund that, subject to the payment of any other outstanding invoices that come to administration's attention.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Batour.
Yes.
Ms. Rao.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item is, I referenced a short time ago, properties that are hoarding situations. We do have one, 63 Hemlock. We would, even though authorization is not entirely required from the board, I think because potentially declaring a property blighted is a significant issue. We would appreciate a motion from the board authorizing administration and codes to apply to the Berks County Blighted Property Committee with respect to this property. What happens in this process is that we send the documentation into the Blighted Property Committee and they have a hearing, they notify the property owner and ask the property owner to describe why this property should not be declared blighted. It's not an automatic, we're gonna take the house. It doesn't work that way. It's really, more akin to the public hearing that we had on dangerous structures, is to get the issues out in the open and discuss them with the property owner. So administration is asking for authorization to apply to the Berks County Blighted Property Committee for 63 Hemlock Road.
Second.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yeah.
Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bachelor.
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Rao.
Well, I just have one question. So, you've been there to 63 Hemlock Road, so it's just like really junky and messy and like a lot of stuff.
There have been numerous codes violations sent to the property owner with respect to the property. I would actually encourage you to drive down Hemlock Road. It's so significant that the items are now drifting into the right of way. We might not even be able to plow the road.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bob, Public Works.
Good morning. Just want to make sure we're paying attention, right, Bob? A motion to, pay, Mason Dixon contractors for the recent stormwater work on Montrose Boulevard, in the amount of $270,064.80.
So moved.
Second.
Who was the first? Was that Dave? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bachelor.
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yeah.
Ms. Rao.
Yes.
Updated the Street Top Road project, they are still in what's phase two. Phase one was pushed back, but they're working their way up the hill from Penguin. They're just going past Keelan Drive today, and things are moving along well with that project. We've done some joint work, or Chillicot's kind of come in and worked on their water main on the lower end of the road, which is good news. So that's moving along well. I see we need a second motion to pay Kinley Construction for the work on Flying Hill Drive, sewer main, in the amount of $98,767.11.
I make a motion, we pay the bill. Second.
I'll second it.
Mr. Bachelor,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yeah.
Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Rao.
Yes.
That's all I have unless you have questions.
Thank you, Bob. Joe, the engineer.
Yes, just an update on the Hunters Road Phase One project as part of our 2024 street projects. Construction is progressing very well. We have the subgrade stabilized. They are putting in the geotextile and stone. Hopefully we'll be able to start paving at the end of this week. I do have a application for payment number 1 from Barwis Construction for a total amount of $124,666.06. And this includes the items for preparation of subgrade, under drain and stabilized soft and yielding areas, and looking for a motion from the board to approve that total to Barwis Construction for $124,666.06.
I make the motion.
Second.
Mr. Bachelor,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Rao.
Yes.
That's just to make sure you're on your toes. That's out of liquid fuels, by the way, that payment. We'll see that out of liquid.
Item number B, just an update on the Freemansville Road, which at the last Board of Commissioners meeting, the board directed our office and the township manager to prepare a letter to PennDOT requesting a traffic study be performed on Freemansville Road, which is the state route 3003, for either prohibiting or restricting size and class of truck traffic, as well as looking at the posted speed to be lowered. It's currently 35 miles per hour. See if that speed limit can be lowered. Just for information, that letter has been sent to the district executive, so we'll be waiting to hear back and once we do get a report back, we can report at a future board meeting. Next item is, Mount Penn Road. We did prepare a cost estimate, to perform a engineering and traffic study to determine whether or not truck traffic can be restricted or prohibited, or restricted to the size, kind, or class of truck. Our study would be in accordance with PennDOT Chapter 212 and the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is federal highway standards, which PennDOT adopts it, including any other pertinent sections. Our study would be detailed that we would be utilizing mapping, that they call LiDAR mapping, which we would be looking at the geometry of the road and running truck templates to determine whether or not the horizontal or vertical geometry is can accommodate truck traffic in a safe manner, or whether or not those size of trucks have to be reduced to restrict them to a smaller size for safety purposes. We would also be looking at accident history. We'd be coordinating with Township Police Department, as well as looking at any traffic data, analyzing the road for sight distance and so forth. Our total cost or proposal is $9,500 for the board for discussion and consideration.
I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to move to authorize the traffic study.
Do you have to make a motion, I think, or what?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, well, I'll second it. Andy made, I think.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Can I add a question since I live on Green? Ask a question.
should I finish the vote first?
Yeah, I would. Well.
Mr. Regnar,
Yes.
Mr. Bador,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell, I think I asked, Ms. Rao.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Bill Miller, sorry.
Maybe you're not paying attention.
You got me off the hoodle out of order.
Yes.
Thank you.
My question is.
Last item is an update on the Cedar. Excuse me. The last item is an update on the Cedar Top Road slope geotechnical report. It's in progress. We have reviewed the report and looking at different alternatives for remedying the situation. And at the moment, I'm in contact with the geotechnical engineer, and I'll be coordinating with township staff to prepare various solutions and associated costs for construction for the board to take into consideration at our upcoming Board of Commissioners meeting in August. So the study has been completed, but we just need to finalize some of the costs for construction to mitigate the problem.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Kelsey.
All right, thanks. Item A is the zoning ordinance text amendment. At a previous meeting, the board did authorize all the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance in items A1 through 4. So we're just working, Gina and I are working together on getting some of that language ironed out so that we can present you with something for review, but it may take a little while because it's, especially agri-team and Airbnb is going to take a lot of thought. So we're working on it. Item B is the dangerous structure at 715 Philadelphia Avenue. If you recall, we did file a petition in the Court of Common Pleas for injunctive relief to actually have that structure demolished due to how dangerous it was. We had court last week and the judge did grant our order after a hearing for demolition of that property. And I think we did get a cost estimate in for what that demolition would be when the township is moving forward with that.
On that one, Kelsey, I know 717, the guy who was like working with us and trying to be productive in the whole.
Yeah, Mr. Jankowski had already demolished 717. And he's going to rebuild on that property, but his property has a bigger footprint than the rest of them, so he can build sort of away from where everything else is. The issue was if he started to lay a foundation for what he wanted to build on 717, it would be almost impossible for 715 to then be demolished because they couldn't get equipment in there and it would risk ruining what he's already, right? So it was pretty important that we took those kind of emergency actions when we did, so that 715 wasn't sitting there unable to be touched for however long it took. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Correspondence. A, downstream notification from Heritage Power regarding Titus turbine received 7/15/24. B, Berks County Municipal Waste Management Plan, July 2024, and DEP notification of multi-dam removal dated 7/24/24. Executive session.
Actually, I kept those on there in case something would develop, but, we do not need an executive.
Sounds good to me. Reminders. 1, Board of Commissioners meetings for August and September 2024. August 20th at 7 p.m. That's a regular meeting. And September 17th at 7 p.m. That's a regular meeting. Item 2, Planning Commission, August 5th at 6 p.m. And number 3, Zoning Hearing Board, August 27th at 6 p.m. Application number 820 Old Hickory Buildings.
And today we just received another application for zoning hearing of dimensional relief on a property on Forest Drive here on Welsh Road. So we have 2 hearings for the August meeting, the zoning hearing.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.